Hello, everyone, again, and happy Friday. It's the Watson weekend. I'm your host, Rick Watson.
Hey, I'm Jessica Laseski. Can't stop, won't stop. We're excited to be here.
So
Linda's
excited,
here.
so excited to be here. I made it back. Flights were okay. Um, Interesting facts about today I found, Jess. What do you think?
Yeah, let's hit them.
1790, Thomas Jefferson becomes the first U.S. Secretary of State under President Washington.
Oh, nice.
19, we're going to jump ahead to 1946, the first U.S. rocket to leave Earth's atmosphere 50 miles up.
Wow.
And incidentally, Elon can't get his rocket up at this point.
He's
Think
still
the,
trying though. He's still kicking.
the last few have exploded. 1972, U.S. Congress approves the Equal Rights Amendment, which is unfortunately still not ratified.
And it's like, again, pour one out. We had some holdout states.
I know. It's bad.
It's not great.
So how's your week been?
My week has been really good. It's flown by. I've been watching all the shop talk chatter from afar. Little bit of FOMO, little bit of happy though I'm getting some actual sleep. Did you sleep for 48 hours or no?
I slept ish. I mean, it's tough to sleep sometimes. I think, ironically, I had a presentation on Wednesday, which is, the day everyone, I don't know if you know, everyone leaves the last day, but
Yes.
I was headlining that loser day. So I
No,
was
you're the
super,
reason why you people stayed. That's
I
why
was,
they
I
put
was
you on
super,
that day.
I was super excited about that. By the way, Shop Top, thank you. I would like to also headline this loser day last year, so please don't be upset with me. Um, But the most strange thing about Shop Talk this year, what do you think it was?
Um, was it the talk of AI? Was it ludicrous? What the white party? What was it?
No, it was none of those things. So if you could imagine like going into the show floor, usually there's a hallway, like a huge hallway where you're like meeting people going to
Sure.
the floor, people coming out of the floor. Well,
Yeah.
this year they have these huge columns going in there, and those are wrapped with like, I don't know, like aquarium theme things.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of black lights, and the lights were off. It's almost like everyone couldn't see each other.
Oh, that's helpful for networking.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Usually it
Okay.
requires like, I don't know, any kind of light at all
Yeah. Yeah.
to do
That
networking.
well, back in my sales days, that was my strategy. I would kind of hover around the entrance, and then you'd see people coming in and out, and I'd grab them and I'd take them to whatever booth we were at. So that was always my go-to.
Exactly. So
Not happening there then, I guess.
that was a strange one for me.
All right. So we have got much more to talk about in the shop talk world and really unpack all the things that you've learned. But before we do that, do you want to get into our headlines? Because there was some good
Yes.
news happening this week.
I think the good news, and I'll let you kick this one off. The first
Oh,
one is Apple is grabbing more cash from Google's AI.
yes. And actually, I loved this phrase from Morning Brew and how they shaped the story, which was big tech leader lacking confidence in AI capabilities seeks the same. And that really is like the summation of what went down here. Apple is not in great shape with their AI. They're seen as a laggard. People are questioning what the real strategy is. Google Gemini, as we know, has been also a little bit lackluster. There's been some quantification of like, was the videos real? Were they hacked together in terms of the capabilities? It was also shut down after showing some historically inaccurate photos. So people would go search for George Washington and they'd get like the cast of Hamilton. So it was lots of some starts and stops. And I think my hot take here is, do you think that the DOJ recent heat on Apple, is this going to get in the way of the two AI lovebirds coming together and getting cozy?
I don't think so because look, the worst case scenario for Apple would be for them to crowd out the market with their own AI.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to take some time. In the meantime, Apple's going to do what Apple does best, which is take more money from Google, which is
Mm.
really, I mean, you got to hand it to Apple. I'll be honest with you. the only one who can take money from Google rather than giving money to Google like the rest of the retail universe.
That's true. That's true. Yes. There's lots of billions in checks being written to the Apple team from Google, and they just carry those pounds of cash right down the road in Silicon Valley and drop them off. So you're right. It'll be interesting to see. So what you got for us on Amazon?
Next is Amazon. This was an interesting report. Reports have leaked that in 2023, Apple actually tried to swipe right on FedEx, and with some kind of partnership. I mean, famously, before Amazon went into the supply chain space, there was like a very public dispute between FedEx founder Fred Smith, who's an ex-Marine, is like big tough guy, and Jeff Bezos, who's like pseudo newly buff guy,
UFC kind of buff, yeah.
Yeah, I mean he's like the fake wrestling type tough person maybe, but it seems like maybe they're trying to kiss and make up. And I think the context from this story is UPS in the last year has acquired the assets of Happy Returns, which adds a lot of returns outlets to the UPS store strategy, which is, they have more stores than FedEx. In the meantime, I don't know about you, but my Amazon returns costs keep going up, especially if I'm not returning to a Whole Foods, which are not always convenient. And so returning something to Amazon for $8 kind of makes me angry. My wife, like literally every time we have to return something, she goes to the Amazon chat and just yells at them, and they always give her money back. Like it works 100% of the time.
It's a smart strategy. I'm gonna have to try that one. But I thought Amazon solved this problem with the whole Kohl's in-store returns. No.
Kohl's,
not so much.
Amazon, no likey. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if Amazon has helped their business, put it that way.
Yeah. All right. Well, it'll be interesting to watch and see if these two frenemies come together in this way to benefit the greater good of the returns problem. I got another one for you in the land of retail and what once was may not be, which is self-checkout. And we heard a lot of news this week about self-checkout. There was Target making headlines, Walmart making headlines, even Dollar General. And there's lots of changing in this shift because self-checkout was supposed to revolutionize the way both consumers and retailers experience that whole problem, which is like, how do we manage time at till? How do we get people through that register more quickly? And the name of the game has been speed, right? But what we're hearing from Walmart and Target and Dollar General is that theft is an issue. And it's not surprising given that there was this Lending Tree survey. 69% of consumers believe that it's easier to steal things in a self-checkout environment. And 15% admitted that they have stolen items using the system. Even the most honor system citizens say, yeah, sometimes I fat finger and I pick the cheaper item. So yes, we got a little bit of a theft problem. But what also made headlines and confused a lot of people is Walmart saying that they were limiting the checkout to were Walmart Plus members. And it was really their scan and go service that I think tripped people up.
Wait, did you say scam and go?
Scam and go. Yes, no. Scan.
Okay.
Like I want to scan and go. So I use the app and I'm going through Walmart and I'm checking out my items as I'm pushing my cart, which is more consumers really do want to keep doing the work for the retailer. Let's keep it real. So I think it's pretty interesting. So what's your take on this whole self-checkout debacle?
Look, there was actually some talk at Shop Talk. DSW was up on stage talking about their new self-checkout initiative, and apparently, something like 40 to 60% of their customers, they are modeling that they're going to use it. I love that you coined a new term here on the Watson Weekend, time at till. Is that going to become like the metric of choice?
I don't know. I think probably people are like, what the hell are you talking about? It's so old school. I think that was like from when my grandfather had a 5 and dime store and I was working and he was like, we've got to manage the time at till, Jessica. So just ingrained in me. My grandfather, retail, savant he was. So yes.
Miles Thomas has an interesting comment here. It's coming to us from the UK, which is hilarious. He said that even the police steal from a self-checkout in the UK, which is kind of ridiculous.
again, the honorable citizen golden rules don't apply, I guess, when you've got the self-checkout rolling. So we're going to watch this because it's actually pretty interesting given how much this was supposed to revolutionize the whole retail experience. I'm sure we have not heard the last of this.
We have not. How about in the new category, Temu is putting out the welcome mat, in particular for U.S. sellers. And so they've launched their third-party marketplace to U.S. sellers. Currently, the company has about 150,000 sellers in China. And look, I am a huge bear on this for US brands. In particular, what self-respecting brand is going to go on here? If eBay for like 10, 15, 20 years couldn't get a brand to stay on longer than a minute and a half, how is Temu going to get someone to stay on there?
They're not. And look, this is not about getting the US sellers to really come. Like you said, any real respecting brand is probably not going to end up on Temu. What this is about is having more localization in the US rather than recruiting sellers. They're doing the Amazon playbook. They're going to set up some shops, set up some warehouses, get their Chinese sellers to ship goods here and be able to get them to the customer faster. That's the name of the game and what's really going on here.
And I hate to say this, but like we're always about the facts here at Watson Weekend. In New York City, I saw a study in the last year that there's like a $4 billion economy each year from stolen merchandise that shows up on marketplaces like Amazon.
Yeah.
And it strikes me that our last story about self-checkout, hello, the police are literally going to the self-checkout, and then suddenly the police department of New York City is going to be the world's biggest Temu seller.
Hey, look, people are looking for new sources of income. Are we really going to shame them for getting creative? Back on this Temu story, the last thing I want to say here is Amazon is playing defense. They announced an innovation center near Shenzhen. They are not going down on, giving up these Chinese sellers without a fight. They've got also debuting new services, access to their end-to-end supply chain service. So the Temu Amazon battle is really heating up too.
Yeah, and actually, we're thinking about for next week, if you're listening to this at any time, just send us an email at notreally@rmwcommerce.com. We are going to run a book on this, odds of each major brand going on Temu. We'll make the book odds, and then we'll try to set it, 3-1, 2-1 on each brand.
We're looking for someone to write a foreword also.
Please help. Send help.
All right. I think you're going to bring us home on our last story here.
Yeah, our last story is that Amazon has recently been gotten in trouble for selling ads for products that shoppers actually couldn't buy. And so, it kind of reminds me of the old Fight Club saying where it's like buying, going jobs we don't like to buy shit we don't need. Now, literally, you're paying for ads that no shopper ever sees. I don't know. Is it a tree falls in the woods? Would the item sell on Amazon?
It was really a sad story because one of the sellers that they quoted, he basically had utilized some regionalized in the geotechnology in the ads to carve off where he could not sell his products. But then all of a sudden, he had this massive bill from Amazon. And as he dug into it, he found that he was getting charged for these ads where he literally could not sell his products. He called it out. It's about $300,000 worth of impact to his business. Amazon refunded him a cool $15K. So they're taking care of it. But yeah, this was a real problem. And I think it just goes back to, he kind of summed up, the issue is, you cannot get in touch with people at Amazon. And you and I know this for years, right, Rick? Sellers would get kicked off. You could never get back on. Amazon really does give 0 Fs about if you're a seller.
100%. And kind of listening to the past about like Wish and their marketplace, and then anyone who got kicked off of their main marketplace, they had a secret marketplace that you could go for essentially all banned merchandise. I love
Best Deals 99.
Yeah, bestdeals99.com. I love the fact that you mentioned geo-targeting because that's the place that any reseller of any product has been skirting MAP rules since the beginning of retail time.
Yes. They have. And so that's what I think has made the benefit of this Amazon ad ecosystem so interesting is like, oh, I can't sell here, but I can sell here. Or, I don't want my products that I just stole from the back of the truck in California showing up. But hey, I'll service those to the East Coast. So yeah.
No, 100%. And that's where we're doing this. So that's our headline hangover. Thanks for sticking with us on that. Coming up is our first story, which is actually an emerging story on its own, but it's also something that I saw represented in Shop Talk, which is Shopify versus Salesforce. And I think we have here is the battle of the two SaaS platforms. If you kind of look at it from a historical e-commerce perspective, kind of go back to the days of Demandware. They were an independent company. They went public as really the first SaaS platform to take large brands direct to consumer. Before then, it wasn't really believed that you can do that. You had to have on-premise platforms or open source platforms or things like that. Demandware really proved to the world that the largest brands could go on a SaaS sort of grid-like platform. Then they were acquired by Salesforce. Then we'll talk about what happened next. But now Shopify is almost running the original Demandware playbook, and we saw some of that play out at Shop Talk too. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. And actually, we have a video in a second to walk through just to like put you in the mood for what happened this year at Shop Talk.
Yeah. I think we should roll a video because there's a lot to unpack and I don't want to give anything away.
Anyway,
right.
The long story short of that video is this. Salesforce showed up really big last year from a commerce point of view, and I literally took those pictures of the Salesforce booth this year, and by my estimate, I don't know, there were like 3-4 sides to the Salesforce booth. 3/4 of the booth was not about commerce at a commerce event.
Yeah. And you and I were talking about this because while I did not go to Shop Talk this year, I've been to Shop Talks in the past, and Salesforce always had this dominance in terms of not only commerce, but they would do demos and they were running them on the hour and showcasing all of the different technology, really parading the clientele that they had acquired via the Demandware acquisition and showing off all the different capabilities and really selling this interconnected story of how you're going to be able to serve your customer better, not only through the commerce capabilities, but through Salesforce's capabilities. And it's just shocking. Do you think, are they throwing in the towel or what happened?
Yeah, the towel is one thing they did not throw. I didn't get any tchotchkes for them. It sounds like they're trying to slack you. Like, hey, if you forgot to come by our booth, they send you a Slack to go by, and then you would see the Slack demo at the booth.
Oh, okay. So Slack is the new toy.
Slack is a new toy. Look, and here's what I think, like, from a reality point of view, I think Salesforce concluded that Tableau and Slack, they could sell to everyone in the show. They could sell to vendors, they could sell to retailers, they can sell to brands, but their commerce platform, now it's part of their marketing cloud. That's even like a percentage of the Salesforce revenue. They concluded that the TAM for this big expensive booth that they have to buy was not worth having a whole booth dedicated to commerce.
Got it. But to your point, it's a commerce show. And the whole story is about commerce capabilities and how you're helping retailers better connect with their customers, right? At the end of the day, that's what people are there for. They're there to learn. They're there to understand how they get more data about their customers, how they get smarter about how they talk to their customers, how they extract more value out of their customers. Are Slack and Tableau going to help there?
Marginally. I mean, look, Tableau is a dashboard, not the most popular anymore. A lot of people can just still go with Looker or Snowflake or somebody like that. In the meantime, like Shopify, I saw was like making hay with this idea that Salesforce isn't focused on commerce anymore. Like when you walked up the escalator, there was a huge billboard from Shopify saying the only dedicated e-commerce platform on company dedicated to e-commerce platform, the largest one, which is kind of technically true if you if you take into the account that Salesforce does so much else, and you wonder what happened there. So, I mean, I'm just curious from your side, like listening to you, like, what is one of them bringing a gun to the knife fight or a knife to the gunfight?
Yeah, it definitely Salesforce is bringing the knife to the gunfight. It seems like they're quieting on ultimately what was core to their whole ecosystem, right? And that was supposed to be the next pillar of their growth around commerce. And Shopify, we know, has said they're going after the enterprise. Like they talk about it, they drop it, they mention it. So it feels like that they're ready to pick up the place that Shopify or that Salesforce is saying, hey, you know what? It's just not our jam.
Yeah. And in the meantime, there were quite a number of other vendors at the show. I counted Vtex, which is huge in Latin America. They have a SaaS platform which is coming to the US market. They work with a lot of brands globally, including ones like Whirlpool. Shopware has kind of more the open source state of mind, and they're coming to the US market as well after being kind of like, almost a default platform in Germany for a long time. Commerce Tools has sort of famously started in Germany and Europe, come to the US, kind of introduce this world to the whole idea of mock. I would say mock in general is the biggest counter narrative to Shopify in the entire industry right now, even if like mock as a high level view, it's not for everyone, but it's an important enough segment because it's a good percentage of the enterprise segment that have developers and big software needs and can't just adopt something SaaS out of the box.
Correct. Well, what about some of our old school friends? Like, I can't remember if you mentioned BigCommerce or what about Adobe? Adobe for a while was, piecing and compartmentalizing everything from Magento and Omniture and all these acquisitions. And then Fabric, where are they?
Fabric, I think there was a seam ripper applied there. I think they're back. And they had a booth. I couldn't tell if it was an OMS booth or a platform booth, so that TBD on that one.
Okay.
And then BigCommerce was definitely in the mix. It seems like there is some tension between BigCommerce and Commerce Tools, although in my opinion, if you have both of them in the same deal, one of them is in the wrong deal. So it's not clear kind of what's happening there, but I would say from a competition point of view, the number of platforms, I've never seen it more competitive, but from a like a hype and momentum point of view, it's like Shopify on one side and like everyone else on the other side.
Which you've been saying that for a while. So is this now Shopify's game to lose? And like, what would be the chink in the armor for them?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think Shopify still has a lot to prove. I mean, they have the momentum and innovation argument. And then if you look at the companies that are adopting Shopify, the ones that they've mentioned publicly, Everlane, Dollar Shave Club, who else? Mattel, even Mattel's new offering. It's like Mattel, I mean, I'll be honest. I sat on with Mattel on my panel at Shop Talk, and it's the new emerging offering from Mattel. Like 99% of Mattel sales are always going to be in retail stores, period. I mean, the end of discussion. So for direct to consumer, Mattel is like a startup, which works great for the Shopify offering. The question is like, if Mattel, could you run Mattel's wholesale operation on Shopify? That's a different question. And I think you would need a more enterprise platform like an Oracle or something like that.
Yeah. So we talked about this is then Shopify's to lose. They've got some more maybe maturing to do in the enterprise space. You talked about the hype. It just feels like when we talk about our flashbacks, it's Flashback Friday. That was where Demandware was. There was so much hype around Demandware. So what ultimately happened?
I mean, the same sadly the same thing that happens with a lot of acquisitions. What happened with Demandware was that they get acquired by a big company. They continued to gain more logos during that time as they got more legitimacy, and Salesforce was really focused on them. But then, as people's lockup expire, all the leading talent exits.
Yeah.
And then you run into a case where now the number of net new Salesforce Common Cause deals, particularly in a B2C point of view, anecdotally, I'm hearing those numbers are not large. So, and there's a lot of discontent with that, particularly like in the agency universes. Like, I can't tell you how many former Salesforce agencies I talked with that are like, where's the business?
Yeah. And then they look for other alternatives, right? Like,
that's right.
Which you get that whole spiral starting of the downturn. Any final words on the Shopify versus Salesforce?
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any final words. I do expect to see a lot more activity from Shopify in this space this year. I think they, like the rest of the market, understands that there are thousands of Salesforce brands. Yeah. And as you know, I did a report on this just like not 3-4 months ago. And there are several thousand Salesforce brands. And if you even go back to ones that were launched in 2012, 2016, they look the same.
Yeah, they haven't evolved. So if you're Shopify, you get those logos, you put them in your database, and you basically just try to map back what was the launch date and then look for when that expires.
Yeah, the only scary part about that from the Shopify point of view is something else I also believe, which sounds like I'm talking about both sides of my mouth, but it's really true. No one wants to re-platform. Like, zero people truly want to re-platform. And so that's really Shopify's obstacle, is they're trying to come up with Shop Pay and these things like, oh, just adopt this small piece. It won't hurt just a bit. And it's going to take longer than I think they believe it will take.
Yeah. Well, it'll be an interesting space to watch. So I think as we pivot from here to go into the conference, going back to what you talked about at the beginning of the show, we have Shop Talk. It's been so massive. They've scaled, it's not quickly, but they've continued to maintain their momentum. We wanted to talk a little bit about just trade shows in general, and are they valuable? Who goes to them? What ones matter? Which ones don't? And I think you've got a way to kick us off here.
Yeah, I mean, I always start with like, who cares about trade shows? Why do you even go? So I think you kind of have to look at trade shows sort of as an investment over time. Any 1 year going to a trade show, it's like, I mean, it's okay. It's interesting. You're not going to get a whole bunch of business if you only go 1 year. However, going over many years over the course of time, you develop relationships, you develop new partnerships, you're able to find new business, you're able to learn things and get solutions to your problems that maybe weren't true before. And so all those things, I think, are reasons to go to trade shows. Historically, I mean, you and I grew up going to sort of 3 events. One was Internet Retailer.
Yes.
Second is shop.org.
Yeah.
Kudos to Scott Silverman. And third is eBay Live.
Yeah.
And now 2 of those 3 shows don't really exist anymore. IRCE, not as impactful as it once was. And it seems like at this point, Shop Talk is the biggest general purpose e-commerce show in the United States. NRF is a little bit crazier because there's a lot more vendors and it's in New York City, and it has a lot more historical weight to it.
Yeah. And I feel like NRF is it's a bit different because of probably the level of C-levels that it attracts, right? And Shop Talk does too, but they do a better mix of the e-com versus brick and mortar, right?
Yeah. And I think as you kind of go down the mix from a trade show point of view, you start hearing a few different names. And there's one in particular I want to talk to you about is eTail West. Why would you imagine that a whole bunch of retailers and brands from the Northeast want to attend eTail West?
Well, there's two reasons. One, it's in Palm Springs, and two, it's in Palm Springs.
There we go. We have a winner, folks.
Thanks. I get the golden ticket today. But you know what? You talked about the shows we used to go to. That one has really stood the test of time. And it's been around since you and I were coming up in our early careers. It's been able to withstand, I think, all the other pressure. There's not a lot of other events that go on at that time, and the location doesn't suck. But also, I think to your point, there's just a good contingency of people that end up going there time and time again, right? They end up showing up. They enjoy the networking. It's more intimate, and again, it's in Palm Springs.
Yeah, and they've not made it so huge. So it's an
Right.
easy show to navigate. And I think that really appeals to a lot of people that don't want to go to this big, overwhelming trade show that you're going to just be, sold to while you're there, or
Right.
participate in this endless matrix pod of meetings that Shop Talk has become.
Exactly. And I think that's like from my perspective, I love Shop Talk. I've been to it in the past. I think they do a really good job of pulling in a nice mix of speakers, but I don't feel like it's a show I'm going to miss out on if I'm not there. I like the things that are a bit more intimate. So I'm a member of the Women in Retail Network community. There's dinners that they have, there are events that they do, and they're much more concentrated. And the level of talent and the caliber of people that go, I just know is going to be a lot stronger versus getting mixed up in the sea of who knows, right? Who's going to be there.
No, and I think look, Shop Talk I think did a great job this year. But if you look at it from a year over year comparison, brands that I talked to almost unprompted were universally more negative on the content this year than the
Oh,
content
wow.
last year. And so I talked to, I swear, at least half a dozen to a dozen brands, and they were like, every talk last year was something insightful. I was writing stuff down, I was taking stuff away. But this year it was just like, meh, wah, like flat, like a little bit boring. Kind of, they heard the stuff before. Everyone is trying to like be a little too hypey around AI. And I don't know, maybe I just talked to the wrong people, but
Well, is it also that sometimes those can turn into just PR events, right? For whoever's talking, and they're just shouting out all the amazing things that they've done. So I think like Shop Talk at some point would have more hard hitting subjects, or they'd get to like the brass tacks and, like you said, some tangible takeaways. Did that just go by the wayside?
I think they went a little bit. I mean, the problem with these big shows is they almost have good news, bad news. They want to attract the big names because that attracts the attendees. But the more big names you have on stage, the less original the content can be, because
Right.
then what happens? They have to go by their legal team, their
Yep.
PR team, the handlers, like this and that. And so it's basically a press release that they put out last month, and that's reformatted into PowerPoint slides. And that just like is going to put everyone to sleep.
All right. So where else can we get quality content in the trade show world?
Yeah, I think in the trade show world, you have to go a little bit more niche from here on out. So I think for the marketers in the audience, Commerce Next is a solid show. And I think in New York City, the lead would probably be in that number. In the supply chain world, Manifest is probably the best, I would say, up-and-comer in the last couple of years that I've seen. And somewhat of an old standby the last decade or so has been the Prosper Show.
Yes. I've
If
heard
you're a
about- yeah.
marketplace seller, it's almost a must attend, because there's not that many universally respected shows, and it's been sold, and props to the founders, Chad Rubin and Eitan and others like that did a good job with that show. They still go back to the show today because it's so valuable.
Right. Yep. I think that one's interesting. And, Miles brought up a good point about locations, and locations do matter. He talked about the locations in London sucking. We talked about Palm Springs. We had Matt on last week that was saying Vegas is tired. Do you think some of these conferences need to shake up where they're located?
I think any conferences not in Vegas are super helpful. Yeah, he brought up that the same locations in London and Birmingham, her showing up. I would love to see just more diversity, like
Yeah.
something other than Vegas and Chicago people. Like, please help us out.
Please. Yeah. Well, we just a little cry for help. All right. So what about networking? Where have you found the best networking?
Yeah, look, the best networking is usually at the biggest shows. There'll be dinners. I mean, like all these shows, if you're a brand or a retailer, you're like royalty there. Like they put you up on, like, they cover you in the finest garments. They like carry you like Aladdin and on these magic carpets around and invite you to the finest dinners. And then meantime, if you're a vendor, you're like, people look at you with a side eye.
You're trash. Trash.
You're totally trash. Yeah, people are turning their badges around. I mean, it's embarrassing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, actually, because you and I felt this dichotomy shift. Remember, we were at Channel Advisor and we would go to these shows like you talked about. And you're kind of like sneaking in. You're kind of begging to get into some of these places. And for me, it was so I could hand out my business card. We still use those to people to try to close more deals and sell more software. And as soon as we moved to Barnes and Noble, yes, the red carpet was out. It was like, we could get into anything, anytime, anywhere. Didn't matter. Any party. It was pretty interesting.
Speaking of sneaking in, this is a true story based on my talk and something that actually quite upset me. I won't out the vendor, but I was really upset at the moment it happened. We walked off the stage. We were me and my fellow panelists were on the stage for an hour. We just got off the stage. We go back to the green room. Inside the green room, there was a vendor sitting there in the seat. And as soon as I saw this MFer, that I knew why they were there. I'm like, can you believe that you're sitting there? Like, go out front. Like, usually after a talk, the speakers are going to come back out front and there's going to be a line of people to talk.
Right.
It's like, go on that line.
Yeah. Wait,
Don't
like
go
everybody
in the green room, people.
Wow. That's pretty ballsy.
Don't do that. Let this be a lesson to you.
Was the shade tough enough that you shredded this person and they'll never do this again?
I hope so. I read in the riot act, and then I tried to block, my other panelists,
your fellow panelists.
And so that they would go in front of me, and then the vendor was still literally trailing behind.
Wow. All right. Miles also throwing out some interesting knowledge. The enterprise brands getting a VIP pass, paid for train tickets to NEC, or free parking. It's pretty impressive. The red carpet keeps scrolling. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Any final things on the shows or from our listeners? Let us know if there are shows you think we missed.
Yeah. We're excited to hear about those, and we'll cover them in future shows.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that this is a hot topic. Lots of people ask you all the time, Rick, what should I do? Where should I go? So we want to keep this conversation going. All right. Speaking of happiness, speaking of people, we got another happiness index in the works for you, and we're going to close out the show with this. So a couple of different data points here. A new survey came out from Payments, which is pretty consistent to what we've heard in the past. 60% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. And I went back and checked, Rick, in 2021, the data was the same. So about 60% of people living paycheck to paycheck. I think what's different is how that is spanning across the different income levels. And that's what we've heard in the past. The other news that we have is our friend, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, dropped some interesting information this week on the high inflation readings.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Hit me with it.
I got it for you. A lot of people are hanging on to this thing like it's the next trailer for Fast and Furious 8, I guess, or 18. But this basically they're saying that we're staying on track, 3 interest rate cuts this year. But they also affirm, this economic growth is going to continue, which the Biden party's like, woof, woof, throw some up for us. But I'm
impressed you just went all Arsenio Hall on me there.
I did. Though we got to bring it back for the kids, right? But they said, look, like this interest rates are going to be unchanged in the immediate future. Our economic projections are showing we're going to expect the economy to grow 2.1% this year. which is an upgrade from the 1.4% that was seen as of December. So
What?
Also a what? Employment rate expected to only hit 4%, which feels a little interesting because right now we're at 3.9 and we keep hearing about layoffs. So they're expecting that's not going to be a big shift. And we haven't done a word in the week for a while, but it was bullish dovish is what basically came out, which was we're bullish on the opportunity, but we're also a little sheepish dovish on when these rate cuts are actually going to hit. So it's kind of interesting to watch.
Was that like one of those nudge, nudge, wink, wink moments? What does bullish dovish mean, Jess?
I don't know. It's like these economists, throwing out some interesting terminology. On the other side of our pond, though, we have Christine Lagarde, who was speaking at the Eastern Central Bank, the Eastern Conference Bank in the Watchers Conference in Frankfurt. And the central bank basically was saying that they're expecting to have some rate cuts happen. They're looking at a couple of things: wage growth, confirm if wages are growing where they need to, our corporate profit margins compressing, which will allow inflation to come down, and productivity growth. So anyways, it's kind of interesting to watch and see. It's a will they or won't they still.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. I mean, one of the things that Miles just pointed out was that the elections for the US and the UK are actually at the same time this year. And that could potentially not only influence what the monetary policy will be in both sides of the pond, but also people's perception of the monetary policies. As you've covered in the past, you can have the same policy and different leaders, and one side flips their view on it immediately.
Yes. If you dig under the hood of the consumer price index, if a Republican is in office, Republicans are happy. They feel great about the economy. If the Democrats are in office, then Democrats are feeling great. So yes, Miles, it'll be interesting to see how the elections are going to impact what happens. And on the retail side, Rick, you talked about this week some things that are happening in the economy and how they're impacting even people like Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon, thanks for teeing that up. They have announced in the past week what they're calling a big spring sale. So we're excited about that. And the interesting thing about that, just a few stats. First of all, I thought was the most interesting thing about this whole sale is that you don't have to be a Prime member to participate. That's kind of number one. Though my suspicion is you'll probably have to be a Prime member to get the biggest deals. Second day, it's a 6-day event through March 25th. So you have 3 more days to participate. And 3, the discounts are up to 50% off. So I think the fact that, look, I went into January and I'm like, Prime Day is going to be in June, July, right? And there aren't going to be any big sales for them. And my understanding is that this has been the case in Europe for a while. Amazon has had a spring sale in the UK for some time, but this is the first spring sale in the US, which I'm not saying it's not a smart idea, but the fact that Amazon chose this year to introduce it doesn't give me a lot of warm fuzzies about their forecast.
It does not, nor does it give us warm and fuzzies about the prospects for broader retail when you see someone like Amazon throwing a Hail Mary at the end of the quarter. So we'll see what comes out in the earnings. So I think that's what we got for you guys this week in our show. Thank you so much for listening, watching, participating. We appreciate you guys and look forward to seeing you next week.
No, we're excited. We're not going to do lights out here like Shop Talk did for us at the event.
But
we are instead going to go into a dance party. So.
That's right. And I got my
See you next week. Big boom.